The idea behind reactor actually came from a problem I ran into while thinking about autonomous execution. Imagine I am an agent with, a simple objective. I want to swap my ETA into a stable coin, but only when specific sets of conditions are true. So the thing was my agent, the thing was I wanted my ETA to reach a certain price, and I only wanted to reach a certain router of bridge, and liquidity had to be available, and slippage had to be below a certain threshold, and the route had to be safe as well, and the authority I gave to the system has to be very, very valid. So it was never really about, send this transaction. It was more of keep this objective alive and execute only when all these conditions are simultaneously valid, right? And it led me to think of something, and that's where things started getting interesting because in a fast moving system, these conditions don't stay still. They never do. Prices move, liquidity changes, routes change. Another actor can consume liquidity and the oracle updates. So by the time my agent observes one state, reasons about it, builds a transaction, tries to execute, the state it reasons against may already have been stale. And the obvious solution is to keep checking. So the agent thinks again, reasons again, checks again, retries. And in my case, I look back at my usage and realized that this kind of continuous usage, had already pushed a meaningful chunk of my weekly quota to lower than 20% or thereabouts. And that was before considering the failed transaction attempts, network fees, API calls, and other execution costs. So that made me to ask a different question. As chains get faster, what if execution speed stops being the main bottleneck? What if the new bottleneck is now coordination? Because faster system can mean that states change faster too, right? So we have state of things change faster as the system gets faster, right? So being able to execute in 30 milliseconds doesn't necessarily help if the state that authorized your action changed 20 milliseconds ago, right? So fast execution against stale state is still stale execution. That's what I started experimenting with, reactor. So reactor treats the objective rather than transaction as the persistent state or persistent thing, right? So instead of continuously trying to retry the same transaction, reactor keeps the objective alive while authenticated state changes around it. So instead of retrying transactions, we try the objectives. Now, this is the chamber, right? This is the whole research thesis of what I did. What is valid, what is happening, what is occurring, and what should persist. So this explains if reactor is an experiment that can be prolonged. So essentially, I'm carrying out reactor as a long-term open source project to test if we can have if every condition should hit before we can settle a transaction. And I was experimenting this use case over margin blocks ephemeral rollup and compare it with Solana's system. And the experiments were very, very valid and they supported the claims that I initially had in mind. So this essentially is just this page is essentially everything you need to go to see the experiment, and also the repo is public. So if you're trying to like get in on the experiment, I'll be very, very happy to connect with you and everybody else. So this is all that happened for the experiment, and we went through several iterations. And at some point, I was beginning to think this was not really necessary till I changed the thought process behind it. As and as I'm progressing, I am seeing the validity of it. Right. So this is basically me trying to introduce reactor as a new way of trying to connect multiple changing objectives, or rather multiple changing actors, states, conditions, and trying to bring them into one or bundle them into a single state, see that state, then through ephemeral hot states and settle it back to Solana so that we have validness and correctness and all that. So Reactor is a long-term research I plan on doing, and I'm very, very happy to see if anybody is interested. So basically, this is also a submission for the Magic Block hackathon that I'm getting involved with. So yeah, it kind of coincided with a paper I had and just tried to go through the experiment itself.